oxygen deprivation starts to occur. You start to feel this euphoria, and that euphoria it kind of overwhelms your senses to the point where you're not yourself, and you believe that you can breathe. And it isn't long that you try to breathe, and I drown. I found myself in this absolute darkness. And you got to realize I was in this ocean that was roiling, you can't imagine the amount of noise that an ocean makes when it's pounding those waves. And so suddenly it's quiet and it's peaceful. I'm not being tumbled and tossed anymore. I'm not cold anymore. I'm comfortable. But there's this pervasive feeling that I'm not alone, that there's something greater there. They teach us about oxygen deprivation. They take us pretty far into the euphoria, but this is way past anything I'd ever experienced. So I'm curious, what is this? I just was in the most violent episode of my life, and now I'm in this peace and this quiet. And then I saw just this tiny little pinprick of light, and it draws your attention, Suddenly there's this light. And I started looking at it, and it felt like it was coming toward me. I was moving toward it. And as I got closer and closer to the light, I noticed that it was like millions upon millions of fragments of light. And they were all interacting with each other. If you've ever seen a school of sardines or something like that, where they all swim in unison, it's like they have one mind. These fragments of light were like that, but they were infinite. At this point, I'm like, wow, who am I? What am I? Those types of questions. And I looked down and it was like my body was becoming one of these fragments of light. I started feeling these waves of just love. It was like I was being wrapped in this warm blanket of love. It was incredible. Here, we tend to add a lot of conditions to our love. Okay, I'll love you and I expect you to love me back, and that's conditional love. But this love is unconditional, and it pervades everything to the point that it feels like love is the core element that everything is built upon. As I got closer, 3 fragments broke away, and they were welcoming me home. And I recognized them as family. Not so much family that I'd lived in this life, but more of a greater family that are always with me. And eventually a dozen of them came and they were welcoming me home. They communicated to me that we were going deeper into the light. We went into this area that to me felt very spherical, very round. And we went inside it, and I started to relive my life. It's more than just a review. It's a re-experiencing of your life. And I got to see it from not only my perspective, but everyone I'd ever interacted with. It was like my consciousness had fragmented into these multiple streams of consciousness, and I was looking at it and living my life from all these different perspectives. So every time that I would do something, I got to feel how it affected someone. And I was just in awe of all of it, but I realized that not only was I experiencing it this way, but all of this family that I had met, I call them my soul family, they were experiencing it with me. And like I said, I was kind of a brash young man, and I'd done some things that I wasn't too proud of. And so when it came to some of those elements in my life review, I wasn't real pleased. I was ashamed that they had to experience this, because they were living at a higher level of consciousness than I'd ever known existed. And so for them to have to experience this, but they didn't. They were just loving me and supporting me through this entire review.